You are listening to Real Life and Other Fantasies, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello, fellow storytellers, and welcome to this edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies. In our conversation today, I have a fellow writer, baseball fan, and political junkie, and I have no idea which direction this mental road trip will take us. Michael Freeman, I'm honored to have you join us for today's storytelling journey. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Melvin. I was greatly honored and flattered when you asked me to do this, and knowing that you and I have many similar interests in baseball, in writing, in family, I think we shouldn't have any trouble finding a lot to talk about today.
I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. So let's go right into it. So, Michael, you're currently the Executive Vice President of the Healthcare Leadership Council, as well as a freelance writer. And in the past, you were a communications director for several congressmen and senators. So naturally, we're going to begin this conversation by talking about baseball.
Of course.
So tell us how you became a baseball fan of the Minnesota Twins. And I'm first wondering if you've seen the movie Little Big League.
I have seen the movie Little Big League. It wouldn't rank among my top 10 favorite baseball movies, even with the Twins reference in it. But yeah, I became a baseball fan probably at about the age of 9 or 10 when my family moved to South Dakota. And we lived in a little town in South Dakota of about 1,500 people. And all the kids on my block were all big Twins fans. And that sort of became my acquaintance with baseball, right to the point where even in fourth grade, they would bring the TV into study hall to allow us to watch the Orioles play the Twins in the 69 American League playoffs. And that from there, my interest in baseball just grew and grew, as well as being a huge Twins fan my entire life.
Yeah, it's always great when teachers and administrators in schools incorporate local sports activities into the academic calendar. Some teachers don't like that, but I think it makes for great memories, and I think it builds bonds with teachers too.
Yeah, it's one of my great memories is in 69 and 70, the Twins got swept each of those years by the Orioles in the American League playoffs, back when you only had one playoff round to get to the World Series. And even though the outcome wasn't great, I still have those fond memories of the camaraderie of sitting in the study hall room and cheering on Harmon Killebrew and Tony Oliva and Rod Carew in those playoff games. It's still a vivid memory, even here more than 50 years later.
Nice. All right. So as a lifelong Twins fan, you had a great opportunity for a 60th birthday gift to do something that most fans don't get a chance to do. And I want to talk about that. So your wife obviously understood the assignment when it came time for you to turn 60 years old. And can you tell us a little bit about the gift she gave you for that special occasion?
Well, it's kind of funny it came about that way, because so many times when you see someone throw out a ceremonial first pitch at a Major League Baseball game, it's because they saved some kids from a burning fire or they donated a liver to someone. But in my case, it just because my wife bought it for me. So I go into this story with a little bit of humility to start with. But knowing that I'm a lifelong Twins fan, and by the way, my wife was also a baseball fan. She grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and went with her dad to a lot of Washington Senators games as a kid. Which eventually moved him, the team that eventually moved to Minnesota and became the Twins. So she's a baseball fan too. And in our marriage, she sort of adopted my Twins fandom. So she's become a Twins fan as well. And so we started a few years ago, we started making a trip every year from our home in Maryland to the Target Field in Minneapolis and catch a few games every summer. And on those trips, we would go to a fundraising dinner hosted by the Twin Cities Boys and Girls Club as a fundraiser where the Twins players were the waiters and bartenders. Just a great fun time. And during one of these dinners, she had our kids keep me distracted because she knew I'd try and hold her arm down while she started bidding on the opportunity for me to throw out the first pitch in the next season. And she won that bid. And that started months of nerve-wracking anxiety for me, because all I could think about is I've got this one moment in time where I could fail immensely and just have a nightmare in my mind for the rest of my life of having completely mishandled that pitch. And a lot of my friends, knowing of the pressure to do this, were sending me over and over again YouTube videos of celebrities throwing the ball 10 feet over the catcher's head to the backstop. They sent me one of 50 Cent throwing the ball straight into the ground. In fact, 2 days before the event, Bill Walton, the famous basketball center, missed the catcher by about 20 feet to the left.
I remember that.
So my nerves were heightened for days. I'd say for months before that pitch. I would take my oldest daughter, who lived near us, and we would go out to a field near our house, and I would keep throwing. We measured off the 60 feet, 6 inches, and I would throw pitch after pitch after pitch to her. And I probably threw 1,000, 2,000 pitches to prepare for this one pitch.
Wow.
So we get to the day, and I think my anxiety was at its highest and my confidence was at its lowest, because my daughter and I went to a little field they have by the Viking Stadium in Minneapolis that day, and I was all over the place. I could not throw a strike if my life depended on it. I was all over the ballpark with my throws. And my wife kept telling me leading up to it, "You're a thrower. You're not a pitcher. Stop trying to act like you're a pitcher." So, we get to that evening. I have dozens of college friends there, all of these people that I was in a dorm with at South Dakota State University. People from my hometown of Freeman, South Dakota were there. We had probably 60 or 70 people at an Irish pub near Target Field to gather before the game to cheer me on. So it was a nervous time. And wouldn't you know it, before the game starts, we have a 2-hour rain delay. So I am standing in the concourse, just running my arm in the windmill motion, just trying to keep loose, while the rain keeps coming and coming and coming, and it just won't stop. And then finally, the 2-hour rain delay ends. They finally escort me out into the field, and my wife and my youngest daughter were out there on the field with me, and the rain starts falling again. And my youngest daughter says, "You have got to be freaking kidding me." And so we wait a little bit longer. And before the event, a great guy, Howard Sinker, a columnist for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, who I know, like I know you from Twitter, had been communicating with me and saying, they're going to tell you when you go out to do this that you can't stand on the mound. Just ignore them. This is your moment. You stand on the mound no matter what they say to throw that pitch. I thought, okay, I'll do that. Well, with the rain delay, they were working on the mound to get it ready for the game. And I start, once they introduced me, I start walking toward the mound, and the groundskeeper looks at me and says, "Don't even think about it." And so, so that set that plan aside. So I stop right in front of the mound, get the ball ready. My hands are sweating. I've got it in the two-seam fastball grip, fastball being a complete misnomer for this, and let it fly. And I short hop it right in front of the mound. And you could see the anguish on my face when I do it, because not a YouTube moment of embarrassment, but still short hopping in front of the mound. But it was still a great moment. My friends were up in the stands cheering for me. I got to do a little hat tip to them. And to this day, I keep that ball on my desk with the dirt mark on it, where I short hopped it, where it's sort of a little reminder that you don't have to be perfect to have a really great memory. And being at that moment on the field of a team I have loved for decades, with my picture on the scoreboard and my name being announced over the PA system, just one of the really great moments in life. And, wonderful that my wife gave that to me.
It sounds like you had everything. You had the announcer announce your name. You got a chance to go out on the mound, throw a first pitch. Unfortunately, you had to wait through the rain delay. It sounds like the one thing you didn't have was a walk-up song.
I didn't have a walk-up song. That's a great. I have always known what my walk-up song would be. It would be the Power Station, which was the group made up of former members of Duran Duran and Robert Palmer. Yes. Their remake of T-Rex's "Bang a Gong" would be my walk-up song, had I had that opportunity.
That's awesome. I've had a walk-up song too for years and years. I would use "Those Shoes" by the Eagles.
Excellent. That would be a great walk-up song.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So I've never met your wife. I already like her because she obviously gives great gifts. So getting the chance to throw out the first pitch of your childhood team, I'm sure was an incredible experience. But it makes me curious. What was your first pitch, so to speak, the first pitch in quotations, when you met your wife? And did you bounce that pitch? That's a great way of putting it. I did sort of bounce that pitch, and it's amazing that we have been married for 40 years, given the way I handle things at the beginning. And interestingly, our first meeting revolved around baseball as well. I was at the time press secretary on Capitol Hill for Senator Jim Abner from South Dakota. Wonderful man, passed away a little over 10 years ago. And my wife was the assistant press secretary for Senator S.I. Hayakawa, a Republican from California. And she was organizing an event called Beer, Bus, and Baseball, which would be a press secretary's baseball bus trip up to Camden Yards to see the Orioles play and just have a kind of night of camaraderie. So a mutual friend of ours said, "Hey, I know this guy in Senator Abner's office who would probably love to do this, and you ought to invite him to go along." So she called me and invited me, and she said she thought from my voice at the time that I sounded much older than I was. I was probably 24 at that time, and she thought I sounded like a 40-year-old DJ on the phone. So she said, "Well, there's no future prospects with this guy." She was 28 at the time, and so she came and collected my money, and we chatted a little bit, and the event was essentially called off for lack of attendance. So she returned my money, and at that time, I didn't have the nerve. I was a nerdy guy. I'll admit that right from the start. I was no suave Don Juan type. I was a very nerdy guy, and didn't have the gumption to ask her out, even though I thought she was this incredibly attractive woman. And I kept thinking about it and mulling it over for a long time after that. And I actually faxed her office with an invitation to go out to dinner with me. Didn't ask her face to face. I sent a fax to ask her to go out to dinner with me. And amazingly, she said yes, which to this day I can't believe. So yes, I did bounce that first pitch pretty badly. And but here we are, 40 years of marriage, 3 kids, nice. And three grandchildren later. Nice. And 3 dogs.
And at one time 3 dogs. We're at 1 dog right now.
One dog now. Okay.
We have at our peak had 3 dogs. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks a lot again for sharing your stories. We need to take a short break for a quick message from the sponsor. When we return, I'm going to ask you about your childhood in South Dakota and the time you wrote a speech for Oprah.
Can I be honest with you? The American healthcare system is an absolute mess. It's hard to get the coverage that you need at a price that you can afford. And sometimes even if you have employer coverage, if you try to add on family members, it'll send you to the poorhouse. Hey, my name is Marty Duran. I'm an independent licensed health advisor working out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm licensed in 31 states across the nation. There's no cost to have a conversation about what works best for your health insurance coverage. So whether you have a group plan and it's getting expensive, or whether you have COBRA, which is always expensive, or whether you're wondering whether you get credits on the ACA, Obamacare, the government health care plan run through the states, or whether it would work better for you to have a private policy, I'd be glad to talk to you about your options. There's no cost, there's no obligation. Just call or text 404-431-4581. That's 404-431-4581.
We're back with our guest, Michael Freeman. So your name is Michael Freeman. You were raised in Freeman, South Dakota, and you graduated from Freeman High School. My question for you is, was your family the only family who lived in that little town?
The funny part about this, and we just got done talking about my wife loves to tell people she thought she was marrying money because she figured my family owned the town. But no, it was just a strictly coincidental thing. My father was a traveling salesman. He sold livestock feed to farmers, and we moved around a lot in my early years. I was born in Kansas City. We lived in Chicago when I was very young, moved to Omaha, and then they transferred him to a territory in South Dakota. And he just happened across this really wonderful town by the name of Freeman, and thought it's karma. It's meant to be. So we moved to Freeman when I was in fourth grade, and it was one of the great life-changing experiences for me, if you can have such a thing at 10 years old. But we lived in cities where I was really confined to my yard because we lived on busy streets with lots of traffic going around, and I was just a little kid, and my yard was my entire horizon. And moving to Freeman, a little town of 1,500 people, it was the quintessential small town experience. I mean, you could get on your bike, ride all over town as long as you came home when the 6 o'clock sirens blew, and you knew that was dinner time. And you were out all day playing baseball or football with your friends around town. And it was, to this day, some of my really most valued friends are from that small town experience in Freeman, South Dakota. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Yeah. Old friends are the best friends.
Exactly.
All right. So I'm sure you had a lot of dreams for your life when you were student council president at Freeman High School. Have you done all the things that you imagined then? I'm sure you've done some things that you never could have imagined at that point in your life, but have you done all the things that you imagined when you were in high school?
Well, Melvin, at one point in my school days, I did dream of being second baseman for the Minnesota Twins, but obviously that did not come to be. And my inability to hit a curveball, or really most of the fastballs that came my way, probably played a pretty big role in that. But I've been really fortunate in getting to do the things I've wanted to do in life. I don't have I don't have really any regrets in life. I've been a journalist. I've written for newspapers. I've written a one-act play. I've written a book when I was very, very young. I've written for some incredible people. I've been in the lobbying business and worked on some pretty significant, meaningful issues. So yeah, I think it's been. I've even had a president of the United States throw me out of his hotel room in a profanity-filled display. So I can't say it's been an uneventful life, and I'm grateful for it.
So we'll come back to that story because I definitely want to hear the details. Yeah. But this is a pretty good segue for that. So I've written speeches for 3 men who served as state governors. 2 were in Texas, and then 1 was in Maryland, and all 3 eventually ran for president. But I've never written for any celebrities. So can you tell us about the time you wrote a speech for Oprah Winfrey?
Yeah, and that was a really fun experience in many different ways. Let me start out by noting that a business partner and I had started a little PR firm called the Freeman Masters Group. And this is going to be a winding way of how we got to Oprah in the pre-email days. We started the Freeman Masters Group, and one of our clients was George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And GW wanted to promote a class they had just started on sports marketing and management that was going to be taught by Stedman Graham, who is Oprah Winfrey's significant other. So we did a lot of work for Stedman at that time, promoting his class. And I did some writing on the side for Stedman, and I had sent in some speeches for him and did some work on a sports column he had in a monthly sports magazine, and a lot of fun projects with him. Well, there was no email in those days, so everything we submitted to Stedman was faxed to their apartment. As you can see from the story with my wife, faxes play a big role in my life.
The facts of life.
The facts of life. And so we faxed everything to his apartment. And as we came to learn, Oprah would pick this material off the fax machine and read it. And so out of the clear blue one day, I got a call. And it's Oprah Winfrey on the phone and saying, I'm about to receive this award from the national television producers in New York City. Would you write my acceptance speech? And, I was so flabbergasted and staggered by it that I immediately agreed without, of course, setting a price for my work. So to this day, I don't remember if I ever got paid for that work, but that's secondary to just the art of having been able to do it. And so that led into doing a few projects for Oprah over the years. But one of the great memories I have about that is she invited my business partner and I to dinner with her and Stedman in Chicago. And so we flew out to Chicago and we had dinner with them in downtown Chicago in a restaurant that she owned there. And so she's regaling us with stories all night of, how she gave Christmas gifts to her staff by opening up the Marshall Field department store and letting them just grab in a 30-minute time frame anything they wanted. Just great stories like that. And as dinner's over and we're leaving and we go out the door, I hadn't stopped to think about what a dinner with Oprah would be like. But we go out the door and there's all the Chicago version of the paparazzi out there. There's 10, 12 photographers with flashbulbs snapping and crowds of people wanting autographs. And my business partner and I, who were probably captured in the photos with portions of our head behind Oprah, we just said to ourselves, hey, let's soak this in. We're never going to have another moment like this in our lives. So, yeah, it was quite memorable.
That's great. You didn't realize that you would be able to top that years later by having we'll call it a standing ovation with the twins. It may not have been standing, but we'll call it that. People don't have to know. My
friends from my dorm at South Dakota State did stand for me at that. So I did have at least a 10-person standing ovation after that pitch.
Which is probably half the capacity of the crowd at that point.
After a 2-hour rain delay, yeah, it was the crowd was whittled down some, even though it was in the middle of a pennant race against two teams battling for the Central Division. So there was still a nerve-wracking crowd there.
All right, so tell us the story that you sort of teased earlier with being ejected from the hotel room, and tell us those details.
Yeah, this was one of those things where I think a lot of people would have been mortified by it, but I'm like you, Melvin. I think in terms of stories, and I thought, man, I'm going to have this story for the rest of my life. So we were in the middle of the 1980 U.S. Senate race. I was the campaign press secretary for then Congressman Jim Abner, the Republican nominee, and we were running against a 4-term incumbent, George McGovern, the former Democratic presidential nominee in 1972. McGovern was an institution in South Dakota. 3 terms in the U.S. Senate, and we were trying to defeat him. Well, it was the Reagan year. It was a year when Republicans were going to sweep into Congress at big numbers, and we had a very big lead in our race. We were leading by probably 20 points in the polls. And my boss, Jim Abner, was by his own admission not a great debater. And McGovern was a master debater from college all the way through his political career. So we made a strategic decision that we were not going to debate. And, I think today, with all the pressure on candidates to not do that kind of thing, I don't know that we would have done that today. But at that time, we made the strategic decision not to debate. And it was a huge deal in the South Dakota media because McGovern was doing press conferences every day to call us out for not debating. So at that time, Gerald Ford was coming in to South Dakota to do some fundraising for us and do some media in Sioux Falls and Rapid City, the two big metropolitan areas in South Dakota. So we had talked to Gerald Ford's staff. We wanted to make sure we didn't step in it on this debate issue and have him say the wrong thing when we got to the press conference. So we set up a briefing. The campaign manager and I were going to the Sioux Falls Holiday Inn the day before the press conference to brief President Ford on this issue and what he needed to say. We had his response all worked out. I remember he had a staff member named Chip who said, "Yeah, you guys come on over. We'll have you sit down with the president and get this all worked out." So unbeknownst to us, before he flew into Sioux Falls at an event in Omaha, and this will take you back kind of to the Chevy Chase imitations on Saturday Night Live, President Ford had stepped in a hole in the tarmac at the airport in Omaha and severely sprained his knee. So we walked into his hotel room. Chip, the aide, lets us in, and he whispers to us, "I don't know if this is going to happen." And at that moment, Gerald Ford, in a bathrobe, comes out of his room, sees the campaign manager I standing there in the doorway, and says, "Get them the bleep out of here right now." And so, yeah, we turned around and hightailed it out of the room. And the postscript of that story is at the press conference the next day, a reporter who is today one of my best friends with the Sioux Falls newspaper asked President Ford, "Do you believe candidates have an obligation to debate their opponent?" And Ford pounds the podium and says, "Any candidate who's the least bit patriotic and forthright will debate their opponent." And my candidate just lost all the color out of his face right then. And to this day, he referred to Gerald Ford forever after as that GD Ford. And but to me, I got a great story out of it. I was thrown out of a suite by a president of the United States with an F-bomb. So
nice.
That's a story I could live on for years.
So do you have any other stories from across the spectrum of your career that you'd like to share with us?
Oh gosh. There's been a lot of fun things over the years. The political game just lends itself to a lot of great stories. So I remember one of my favorites is a New York meets South Dakota type of story. And Jack Kemp, who is really one of my favorite all-time politicians, one of the people I just have respected the most in American politics. And I wish more Republicans today were like Jack Kemp. But Jack Kemp came out to South Dakota several times for political events. And it was during that 1980 campaign that we had Jack Kemp out with us in Watertown, South Dakota, which was a town his ancestors had helped found. And so we were doing some events up there, and Jack had the New York brashness in very, laid back, staid South Dakota. And we went in, we had done all of the events that morning, and I was with our boss, Senator Abner, some staff people, the other senator from South Dakota at that time, Larry Pressler, and Jack Kemp. And we go into a little cafe in Watertown for lunch after all of the events are over. And Kemp is just loud, brash, boisterous, and he is lobbying my boss, Jim Abner, as hard as could be, how he had to base his whole campaign on the Jack Kemp Roth tax cut plan. That would win him the campaign if he just talked about the Jack Kemp tax cuts all of the time. And it's Senior Citizen Day at the cafe. So everybody in there is over 70 years old. And, they're all eating their lunch specials. And we could tell the conversation is slowly getting quieter because Kemp's getting louder. And everybody's turning their attention to our table, which is making everyone else at our table very nervous. And at one point, Jack Kemp goes, and I'll clean it up for your audience. He goes, Jim, you got this guy McGovern by the testicles. He didn't say testicles. You got this guy McGovern by the testicles. Oh, you just got to squeeze. And he said that as loud as could be. And it was like church. A hush fell over the restaurant. And Senator Abner was so nervous, he immediately escaped to the restroom. And Jack Kemp just said, well, I guess I'm not in New York anymore. That's also one of my favorite stories from the campaign trails.
That's great. So earlier you mentioned having written a book when you were younger, and I want to ask you about any future plans of writing a book. But first, I want to hear about the book you already wrote.
Yeah, well, it's not a New York Times bestseller by any means, but when I was in high school and even some in college, I wrote for the hometown Freeman, South Dakota newspaper. So people knew me from my byline in the newspaper, doing mostly sports, but an occasional news story. And a neighboring town, Menno, South Dakota, was having its 100th anniversary. And so they hired me to write a book called Menno, The First 100 Years. And it was while I was home from college over the summer. And they just brought over these boxes and boxes and boxes of old historical society papers, old newspapers, everything they had collected over the years, not really categorized at all. It hadn't been organized in any sense. It were just boxes of raw material. And so I spent my summer just sort of collating all that material and then putting it into book form. And what I still remember the most about it is those were pre-computer days because I'm old. And I did it on an old Smith Corona typewriter that was before the automatic, the Selectric error erasing function had them. So I had the whiteout tape that the guy from the Monkees had a hand in invention. Yes, and Michael Nesmith had a hand in invention. Yeah, and so I had just the whiteout, and so I still am amazed to this day that I made it through a 300 or 400 page book. Just constantly making errors and having to white out them and somehow got it done that summer, which I think that the writing was less of a Herculean effort than the typing was.
Yeah, people today have no idea how difficult it was. The struggle was real back then for typing. And I actually took a typing class when I was in high school. I was the only boy in the class because I knew I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and I knew I'd have to be able to type accurately.
The typing class was probably one of the most valuable classes I took in high school because I was like you. I wanted to be a reporter, and that typing class was invaluable. One of my jobs when I was in college was I worked at the Brookings Daily Register on Tuesday and Friday nights when all of the high school basketball games were being played in the region. And I was the lone guy in the newsroom taking the phone calls from the coaches with the box scores of the high school basketball games. And so I had to write up probably 20 basketball games a night on a typewriter, sitting there and have it there ready for the layout guy to do the next morning. And yeah, I don't think people today would fathom doing that on a typewriter. And
in tiny little agate print. That's probably not even the words you hear anymore. I used to do that at a freelance job working for the Houston Post when I was a young journalist, doing the same kind of thing, waiting for coaches to call in on Friday night to get high school football scores. And I'd have to write up a 2 or 3 paragraph story and put in the football stats for the Houston Post newspaper before it went defunct or was bought by the Houston Chronicle.
Yeah, you and I were doing the same type of job. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So, do you have any plans for a future book?
You know, I envy you because you've written two very successful books, and I have not really worked in the long form like that. And as much as I want to do it, I'm not confident in my abilities to do so. My writing today is really short form. In my freelance writing work, I do often sometimes 6 or 7 ghostwritten op-eds a week. I've written sports columns, As I referenced before, I've written a one act play. I don't know if I could do a 3-act play. I did a 1-act play, but I'm such a spent years now in short form writing. As much as I want to, I don't know if I have that long form in me. But I may give it a shot. I may give it a shot one day because there's something nagging at me inside to give it a try.
I think every writer has a secret or not so secret dream to write a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I think because when you're a writer, you think you can write anything. It's obviously not true for everybody, but I think I always say a writer is somebody who writes. You don't have to have a degree in writing to be a writer.
Yeah, and if you do a lot of writing, you want to write about in every form on every topic when you get the opportunity. I think that's one of the things I greatly enjoy about writing, and I think it is true for you as well. That it takes you in so many different directions, and I think I'm a more well-read person and probably versed in more subjects because of how many different things I've had to write about over the years. That you have to be a quick study to be able to pump out a speech or an op-ed on a topic you may not have a much of a familiarity with, and you learn how to read material very, very quickly and absorb it not in a academic sort of way, but absorb it in a practical way that allows you to regurgitate that information out in the form it needs to come out in.
I'm sure we could do a whole episode just on the science of political speech writing, or any type of speech writing for that matter. But we don't have time for that now. We'll talk about it offline sometime or on Twitter. That would be a great conversation.
It would be.
As we're winding down the interview, I'd just like to take some time to offer you to extend one more story or any kind of a piece of advice you might have. Do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, that's a great open-ended opportunity, and it's something I've sort of given some thought to over the years. In the unlikely event I'm ever asked to give a commencement speech or something, but I think one of the lessons that I've certainly taken to heart over the years, as someone who, like all of us, has had ups and downs in their professional life, is never let yourself be defined by your lowest moment. I think there have been lows in life. I've been fired from a job that I loved. I worked for a truly terrible, terrible boss who was a member of Congress, who I won't name. But I'm going to interject with a story on that because it's a fun karma kind of story. But I worked for if you imagine the worst kind of politician, this guy was it. And I worked for him for 6 months. He was cruel to his staff, just terribly cruel to his staff. He called our legislative director a fat expletive many, many times. He, cheated his constituents in many ways, just a horrible person. And so I got out of there after 6 months. And where the thing comes around full circle is that once he left Congress, he became a lobbyist. And he wasn't a very good lobbyist. And at one point, he was really close to retirement anyway. And he had just one client, a major consumer food company. And my daughter was a lobbyist for that consumer food company. And when they decided to get rid of him because he wasn't a very good lobbyist, my daughter got to fire him. So anyway, that's kind of one of those full circle stories. That it's not a very nice person kind of story, but because it involves someone being fired, but it brought me a certain degree of satisfaction. But anyway, back to the life lesson, it is to me that you're going to have really low moments in life and in work and in life, and I've had them. And it would be so easy to let yourself be defined by that and to let that affect the course. But, and I think this fits because this is a podcast about storytelling. You always get to write your own story, and nobody can stop you from that. And no matter whether you've been fired from a job or whether you have a bad job, that doesn't write your story for you. There are going to be opportunities out there for you to do a rewrite and create a new narrative for yourself. And I've had the good fortune to be able to do that. And so even that's why I have no regrets today, even about life's low points. There's no regrets because there's lessons to be learned from them. But just you don't let them define you. You define yourself by writing your own story.
That's a perfect way to end this segment. And Michael, I appreciate you being on here. This is one of our first episodes, and I appreciate the trust you've shown in me to come on and talk about your life story. And then I've enjoyed the stories, and I always enjoy following you on social media, and we'll continue to do so.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Likewise. You're one of my favorite follows on social media, so we'll keep doing that. I appreciate that.
That's it for today's episode of Real Life and Other Fantasies. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our guest, Michael Freeman, for sharing his stories and wisdom. Look forward to continuing the conversation online.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember to shine some light wherever you go. That was another edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies with your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Join us again next time for more stories about more things than you can imagine. Some of those true stories may even be about real life. See you next time.
Make 1908 House of Wine and Ale your new favorite destination between San Antonio and New Braunfels. With 15 ales on tap, more than 30 craft beers in cans and bottles, and over 70 wines, we have a selection that's perfect for both relaxing with a glass or gathering with your friends. We even have wine on tap.
That's right, we have wine on tap.
www.1908houseofwine.com.
Family and animal friendly.